Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the hour, we'll run through all the business bulletins that you need to know about from Africa and beyond. Quite a bit of content to get through tonight, but let's start with a run through the markets here for you. So this is one of those unusual days when you've got a set of green numbers across the board with the exception of Nigeria. The main index over there falling by about 1.3% in trading today. At those levels, it's down almost 3% so far this year. Not majorly different compared to some of the other indices on the board. The Joburg All Share essentially flat on the day, marginal increase on the All Share and the top 40 as well. In East Africa, we're getting into budget season. In another 2 weeks or so, expect to hear what the budget for the 2019-2020 fiscal year will look like. We'll have an analysis on that when it does happen on the program. In the meantime, here's what's coming up tonight. The rand drops to its lowest level in 2019 as squabbles between the central bank and the ruling ANC continue. We'll also explore why Kenya's central bank is rolling out an entirely new currency. And we look at a centre in Burkina Faso that's equipping women to work in male-dominated sectors of the economy. Our starting point tonight is South Africa, where the rand fell to its lowest level this year, as a dispute within the ranks of the ruling African National Congress Party over the mandate of the central bank weakened the currency. It was just over 0.5% weak, in fact, to just over 15 rand to the dollar. That is the first time that the rand has been there since October 2018. Now, for the most part, the latest turbulence has been triggered by a very public internal squabble within the ANC on the central bank's mandate and whether or not it should be expanded to include a focus on jobs and growth. Early in the week, grim data indicated the country's economy had actually contracted by 3.2% in the first quarter. In response to calls for a change in mandates, the South African Reserve Bank has reiterated yet again that its focus remains firmly on price stability as laid out in the Constitution. Right then, quite a bit to get through in this particular topic, so let's get you some analysis on it. Langa Madonko is the investment principal at Summit Africa, where he handles capital raising and investor relations. He joins us now live from Johannesburg. Good to see you, Langa. So the rand slamming into a new low today, just over 15 rand to the dollar. What other reactions are you seeing in the markets?
Good evening, Rama. I think that was the most significant reaction that we have seen in the market today. And I think it was the volatility of the rand is a fable that is well told, and we know how global sentiment affects it, and it's one of the most volatile currencies. I think, however, in the rest of the market, everybody in the local economy anyway has taken a view that the Minister of Finance is the Minister of Finance, and the stance of the ruling party is the stance of the ruling party, and we're hoping that there will be a separation between the sentiment of the party and the direction in which the government will act under the auspices of National Treasury.
Right, but 2 years ago, the ANC was calling for the nationalization outright of the central bank. Now, today, it's a totally different story. They're calling for change in mandates. I mean, given the fact that there's so many other pressing problems to be solved in South Africa's economy, why is the ANC so focused, so obsessed with the Reserve Bank?
I think part of it is there needs to be a greater understanding, and I think it's one of the things the minister has been at pains to do, of what the mandate of the SARB is and what it actually can do. And I think we are actually facing a real crisis in South Africa in terms of the issues that the Secretary General of the ANC put forward in terms of unemployment, in terms of how to grow the economy. And I think we are at a point where the rhetoric coming out of the ruling party is more one where, if that is the sentiment shared by the Secretary General, is the sentiment of the ruling party, because we both know that Ino Kotongwane, the head of policy development in the ANC, and the minister both came out saying, look, that's not the stance that we are adopting. But it feels more like a throw the kitchen sink at it approach. Let's see what eventually works. We probably run out of levers. And I think it will need that the government of the day come up with more creative solutions, and that the ANC start to rethink some of the gears and the levers that they can pull to resuscitate the economy. I'm not exactly sure that the SARB is one of those levers, but you know, the discourse needs to be as wide and as broad as possible to actually find a solution to stimulating the economy. There's a role for government, there's a role for political parties, there's a role for business, and everybody who's in the South African economy needs to put their hands to the pump. I also do share the sentiment that there are more pressing issues rather than the nationalization or the change in mandate of the SARB. And those are the things that we need to be fixing. But let's not ignore any channel from the discourse.
Right. That being said, though, because going back to the central, the Secretary General's rather comments, Ace Magashule, so he's calling for the SARB's mandate to be expanded to include growth and unemployment. But strictly speaking, unemployment is more of a fiscal policy function. It's about taxation. It's about regulation. There's nothing the central bank, strictly speaking, can do about either of those two issues, at least not directly. So, I mean, again, why this focus when presumably the ANC knows that what they're suggesting is simply not realistic?
I think you have to then look at how broad a school the ANC is and the different schools of thought that would be in any panel or discussion. And while you'll have your economists, you will also have other people who come from other corners and other walks of life. And as I said, I think it's more of a conversation that is emanating from everyone saying, look, what do we know and what levers can we pull? And you're right. I think it's a function of the fiscus in terms of how we're going to stimulate growth. I think somewhere in the statement that the Secretary General put across, he made mention of using quantitative easing as a tool for potentially dealing with the issues. And it's a known fact that when the US was on the brink, quantitative easing was a tool that they used. But the circumstances under which South Africa finds itself right now are nowhere close to what the US was at. The US at the time had, I think, a -1 inflation level, and we are at about 6.5. So we don't even have the luxury of absorbing any inflationary pressure that would come in from introducing new currency. I think we also don't have enough investable government bonds to be able to buy back from the market to allow this currency to come in. And these are some of the considerations that obviously the Treasury and the SARB will be taking into consideration. But from a political standpoint, I think there is pressure to address the social elements of the economy. And everybody is fully aware of the debt burden that Eskom poses on the fiscus, the lowering revenue collection by SARS. And I think the solution is one that is being put into the public domain more on a socio-political rather than an economic perspective.
Right. One last question for you. There are, we both agree on this, there are far more pressing problems to deal with, ranging from reforming or breaking up Eskom, if you're that school of thought, or privatizing some or all of the SOEs that are not performing, like SAA. You've got labor reform issues. So in that context, isn't this focus on the Reserve Bank unnecessary distraction? Because here we are talking about what the ANC said about the central bank. We're not talking about what the ANC should be doing to actually deal with those SOEs that are a drag on South African taxpayers.
I think as a South African involved in business in the country, as well as if I were the Minister of Finance, I think my focus would definitely be on how do we turn around those SOEs and how do we boost revenue collection and how do we find a solution to the challenges that have beset Eskom. And I think we then have to come to a point where we must say that there is the ANC, but then there's the government of the day. The ANC is the political party with the largest number of parliamentarians, and therefore it has appointed the president. But he has appointed a cabinet who do not necessarily serve the interests of just the ANC, but the interests of South Africa. And therefore they must act prudently and always look to be focusing their lens on what is best suited to take the country forward. I think the Minister of Finance, as well as the head of the economic policy team at the ANC, have come out to say, look, this is not the policy of government. And I think as investors, we need to take our cue on where the government is going from the government rather than purely from the ANC as a political party.
Indeed. We leave it there for the time being. Thank you very much for your insights. Lange Madonka there from Summit Africa. Now, we're still in South Africa. There are concerns that Africa's most industrialized economy could slip into a recession. As I mentioned a little earlier, first quarter GDP data was absolutely dismal. It pointed to a contraction of over 3% in the first quarter GDP output. That figure, incidentally, was way worse than what the market had expected. Most economists, in fact, were forecasting a decline of between 1.7 to 2%. Here's CGTN's Sumitra Naidu taking up the story.
Many were left shocked. The 3.2% contraction in the economy is the worst decline in growth in 10 years. And the main contributing factor was the electricity shortage. South Africa suffered its worst rolling blackouts in January.
It's a spear in the side of the whole economy, and really it's driving it down into even lower depths. I think that what we're going to see is the Eskom has to complete the two big new power stations, Kusile and Madiba. They are going to have to be completed just because the amount of capital allocated already to them.
Government spend has been declining in recent years. The private sector too is holding back on capital expenditure. Investors have been waiting for new leadership to get this economy back on track, but it's no easy task. The threat of a recession is looming. A sovereign ratings downgrade may also follow.
I think there's a strong risk now that we will see a further credit rating downgrade, and especially the ominous one is that Moody's, who are the only major credit rating agency that still has us on an investment grade, may well decide to downgrade us to junk status. That may not happen this year, it may only happen next year. But the fact is that unless economic growth recovers significantly, we're likely to see all the fiscal metrics of the country deteriorate to a level where further ratings downgrade becomes unavoidable.
This economy now needs decisive leadership and political will. But economists are concerned that the government won't make the urgent changes that are needed. Instead, the ANC is now talking about changing the mandate of the Reserve Bank and introducing quantitative easing.
The one thing that they shouldn't do is threaten interference in the Reserve Bank's independence, which cuts across all hopes of increased investment by the business sector and by foreign investors who believe that the government is set on a course of still more interference in managing the economy.
It's crunch time for the president and his team. South Africans may have to endure more pain before it gets better. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Right then, I'll run through some corporate headlines for you. Let's start at the car world. Fiat Chrysler Automotive says it's withdrawing its $35 billion offer to merge with the French car maker Renault. Now, the firm is calling off what would have been a pretty big deal that would create the world's third largest car maker. This comes after France sought to delay a decision on that deal, and the Renault directors failed to reach a verdict on the merger proposal. Elsewhere, the race to mine Guinea's enormous iron ore reserves has started, although the output could be transported through Liberia if ArcelorMittal shares its resources. Guinea aspires to develop its Simandu mine, but the cost of developing infrastructure and protracted legal disputable deterred its growth. The country is set to reach a deal with China, apparently, to build a 650-kilometre rail line that's needed to transport the iron ore to the closest port. Nigeria's petroleum sector regulator has revoked some 6 oil block licenses due to legacy debts. The move is considered to be in furtherance of a presidential directive to that effect. Nigeria is looking to collect taxes and royalties that the government says are due. Licenses rescinded include those owned by Pan-Ocean Oil Corporation, Allied Energy Resources Nigeria Limited, Express Petroleum and Gas, Cavendish Petroleum Nigeria Limited, and Summit Oil International. And finally, MTN share price is fully recovered from the steep losses incurred in 2018. It's trading at about $7.20. This comes after the Nigerian authorities levied the mobile operator with $8.1 billion in fines. A separate $2 billion demand for back taxes from Nigeria's Attorney General sent MTN shares crashing below $4.20. That's a run through your company headlines. You're watching Global Business Africa. Time for a short break. Here's what's coming up next. We'll be exploring why Kenya's central bank is rolling out an entirely new currency. And what exactly does South Africa have to gain from the continental free trade area? All that and more is in the pipeline for you next.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Africa. Let me take it about 5 days ago when Kenyan authorities formally announced that after years and years of delay, they were finally introducing a new currency. Kenya, of course, is home to one of East Africa's largest economies, and it's also home to one of the continent's best performing currencies, at least if measured by its performance against the US dollar. So far this year, it's actually up by 0.5 percentage points. Not many other currencies can actually say that exact same thing. So why is this switch necessary in the first place? The first thing you've got to keep in mind is that it was going to happen anyway, court cases notwithstanding. You see, when Kenyans approved a new constitution back in 2010, it said, and I quote, "Notes and coins issued by the central bank may bear images that depict or symbolize Kenya or an aspect of Kenya, but," and this is a key word, "they shall not bear the portrait of any individual." Now, given that the current currency bears the faces of the country's heads of state, these notes effectively were on the clock. As a footnote on that, though, there is a bit of a legal challenge about the new design, but that is yet to be decided. But park that aside for the moment. This was the explanation from the central bank governor on why this currency change had to be done.
There were two reasons, principal reasons. The first is to deal with the illicit financial flows that we have seen. The second is to deal with counterfeits that have begun to emerge.
Now then, here is the scale of the challenge that he faces. Over 8 out of every 10 notes in circulation at the moment, that's a blue part of its pie chart, is just one denomination, the 1,000 shilling note. That's roughly $10, introduced back in 1994. Now, back in 1998, 6 out of every 10 notes at that point in time of that denomination, but not anymore. And in one sense, that makes the job of the central bank a little bit easier. But this is how we got there. The chart you're seeing here covers about 20 years, between 1998 and 2018. It shows you the growth of that note, the 1,000 shilling note, in circulation. Now, there have been years of very, very aggressive printing. 2002, for instance, in 2007. Those saw increases of over 30% in those years. There was another hike of about 20% in 2010 and 17.9% in the following year. But the volume increase has become pretty muted thereafter. In fact, between the end of last year and the governor's press conference on the 3rd of June, the volume of 1,000 shilling notes in circulation fell by at least 14.4 million units. Was that just common wear and tear? Was it withdrawal attributable to that particular phenomenon? We're not sure. But if not, you're looking at $900,000 a day that has effectively gone out of circulation in those 5 months. And to be honest, at this point, I don't have a clear explanation for exactly what happened there. The last time there was a decline in the volume of 1,000 shilling notes floating around the Kenyan economy, we've got to go all the way back to 2003. Now, speaking of the central bank, Kenya's president has renewed the governor's term for another 4 years. Dr. Patrick Njoroge, a US-trained economist, was appointed back in June 2015. Terms for central bank governors and their deputies are renewable once under Kenyan law. Now, Dr. Njoroge's term, his first term, got off to a very busy start. He's had to tackle 3 bank failures at that point in time, and then barely a year into it, he had monetary policy crippled by legislators when they introduced a cap on retail lending rates back in 2016. Right then, so clearly the first term in office was a fairly interesting ride, but now that Dr. Njoroge has been formally reappointed for second term in office, what should we expect over the next 4 years? Reginald Kazutu is the Chief Investment Officer at Amani Capital, is live with me in studio tonight. So then, when we were last year talking about Dr. Njoroge,
Yes.
you said if you'd reappoint him for second and final term, you would put him back in office, but now that he's back, what should he be focusing on?
I think 2 or 3 areas. Main one is the basics of any monetary policy, the appropriate level of supply or demand of money. Most of the times we normally run around many things that the central bank is supposed to do, but their chief responsibility is actually the supply of money. And in his last term, I think money supply growth outstripped growth in real income, which is very dangerous. Because you find money supply in a period of 5 years, 6 years grew by more than 200%, well, when real income grew by less than 50, 40%. And when you have such a situation, then you end up having surplus money in the economy.
You're basically priming the pump for inflation.
Exactly. So if you have too much money, more than what industry and trade require, you find people end up using money for speculative purposes, and then it becomes inflationary. And when inflationary pressures start coming in, and that's something that has been there. If you look at the CPI 6, 7 years ago and the CPI now, the currency itself has lost close to 100% of its purchasing power. So you find speculative and unproductive investments of or allocation of resources in things like jewelry, gold, real estate, and even just basic hoarding. And now he's trying to get rid of the 1,000 shilling because of a problem that they created themselves. So I think he needs to focus on that to control the level of M3 growth, to make sure that it's roughly equal to also the growth of real income.
But beyond the basics, that's the bread and butter foundational stuff. But beyond that, if you look at all the other things he's supposed to actually have in his retinue, control of rates, that's essentially been crippled because of the rate caps being in place. He's not licensing any new banks. There's been a moratorium on that for the last 4 years. And even on the bank regulation side, the bulk of assets are basically concentrated just in, I believe, the top 10 banks in the country. So really, what else is there for him to do?
If he actually sits back and realizes that he's in a developing country, put in other ways, an underdeveloped country in terms of financial markets and systems. 2 things that I will do as Njoroge in my last 4 terms. Number 1 is credit control. Credit control in the element of, if you look at the tenure of the loans that the banks give, the commercial loans, they're all short term. And you're not going to grow an economy or grow a business by getting 5 years, 6 years, or even 10 years loan. You need a longer duration of loans. And for banks to be able to do that, central bank needs to come in and start discounting and guaranteeing. Just like what they've started doing with the Kenya mortgage finance, whatever. That's a brilliant idea. They just need to make sure that they put the framework and the structure around such type of discounting and assisting the market. So credit growth, credit control is one thing that he needs to do. The second thing he needs to do, he needs more institutions like the Kenya Mortgage Refinancing Institution, so that we can direct resources to the direct areas in the economy that actually need the funds, the productive side of the economy. So that's a role that he needs to start playing as a central bank governor.
But, and I'm going to play the devil's advocate here, but in a country where fiscal policy has its foot flat on the gas, and I'm actually paraphrasing something he said back in 2015 when he came in, fiscal policy has got its foot flat on the gas. We're running enormous deficits year after year after year. We're raising taxes year after year after year. And monetary policy has been, well, for what we can call monetary policy, because it's been a bit constrained, that's been relatively tame. Who's going to lend us long-term patient capital in that sort of environment?
Pretty much no one, because you have a fiscal policy which is expansionary and at the same time contrary, because they are spending and they are raising taxes. So it's a confused fiscal policy. It's a fiscal policy with no head or neither or tail or even a belly for that sake. Then you have a monetary policy that is trying to create cheap money. And the purpose of doing cheap money is to allow the government to borrow cheaply. So manage the debt burden by making sure that debt is cheaper for the government. But as long as there's no congruence between the two, when will these guys stop borrowing? When will the fiscal policy get to a place where it is balanced? Because as long as they're running a deficit, the monetary policy said there's no option man just to keep rates low, because one of its responsibilities is actually to manage the debt burden of the government. So he becomes a lame duck governor. As long as fiscal policy is going to remain expansionary in projects which don't make economic sense, that means they're going to continue running budget deficit. We have a very low saving rate in the country. So we have to borrow to cover our deficit, so deficit financing through borrowing. So one thing that he has to do as a governor is trying to find out a way, how do you encourage individual or micro saving or even corporate saving in the country, so that you create a pool of resources which the government can now tap into, or even private sector can tap into to grow without having to resort to deficit financing and borrowing. So if he decides to be apolitical, and becomes a governor and an academic and uses his doctorate degree to the fullest extent, then he has actually quite a bit he can actually do for the good of the country. But if he decides to play the political appointee role, then he's a lame duck. We will not see interest rates going up. He will continue trying to do cheap money monetary policy to manage the debt burden of the fiscus.
Right, we'll leave it there for the time being. Reginald, always good to have you on the set. Thank you. All right then, so away from monetary policy in East Africa, let's head over to West Africa. Nigeria, to be specific. A new survey on access to financial services over there shows that millions of low-income earners consider banking services to be a waste of time and entirely unnecessary. Now, this survey shows that only 36 million out of nearly 100 million Nigerian adults are in the country's banking system. CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam takes a look at the numbers.
39-year-old Musa Abdulaziz sells fruits in Garki Market in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. He's among millions of Nigerians who resent the banking system. Most of them are in the informal sector. A new survey on access to financial services shows at least 36.8% of Nigerian adults are not included in the banking system. The survey says most of them do not like the numerous requirements for account opening. They also lack disposable income to take to the banks.
You see, if my goods are finished, I will have to go back to replace my stock. I don't need to take money to the bank. How will I pay for my supply? If my profits accumulate so that I have extra to go to the market, then I can go to the bank. But at this moment, I'm not ready for a bank account. I don't have savings.
The financial system's exclusion is even worse in the northern part of Nigeria, where the unbanked population doubles those in the south. Rampant poverty, insecurity and lack of financial literacy is blamed for the low access to financial systems there. The findings of the survey is alarming, but financial experts think it could have grossly underestimated the scale of financial systems exclusion in the country.
Probably have close to about 90 million accounts in the country. But in terms of the number of persons who own those accounts and businesses who own those accounts, it's actually in the region of about 30 million. So that will give you a far higher percentage of people who are excluded.
The latest findings is an improvement of 4.2% from 2016, but it shows how much more work is yet to be done. Experts are recommending the integration of digital transaction platforms, especially for low-income earners and those in far-flung parts of the country, to draw a significant number of the people into the formal financial system.
We also have to develop more platforms for transactions, for conducting financial transactions without the mediation of cash, so that if more transactions can be done digitally, then more people would tend to want to also get onto those platforms, because it's going to be easier and the rest of that. So you have to create those kind of incentives and a condition that makes it like it becomes a burden, for example, to carry cash around, or it becomes a burden, it's far easier.
Nigeria's National Financial Exclusion Strategy aims at reducing financial systems exclusion to 20% by 2020. That target looks out of reach considering the rate of success being recorded. The country will have to pursue some aggressive strategies and set itself a more realistic target. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Time for another break. Here's what's coming up next. Talks between the United States and Mexico continue as a deadline to impose 5% tariffs looms large. And China has granted its first 5G licenses to 4 domestic telecommunications companies.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
Welcome back. Let's recap the stories making your headlines at this hour. The African Union has suspended Sudan from all AU activities. The bloc as a country will regain its rights and access once there is a civilian-led transitional authority in charge. Elsewhere, 6 people have died, 17 others have been injured in the wake of Tuesday night's landslides in eastern Uganda's Bududa district. According to government officials and the Red Cross, about 50 other people are still missing in the wake of this tragedy. Rescue operations are still ongoing, but the figures for fatalities is expected to rise. Bududa district lies on the border between Uganda and Kenya, and has witnessed a series of landslides in the recent past. The United Nations has scaled up Ebola prevention measures in the DRC to the highest level of emergency. This comes in the wake of an increase in the number of cases. Violence by armed groups has severely affected efforts to control the outbreak. The World Health Organization says that the decision will see more funds allocated to this response program. And in Zimbabwe, government officials have held talks with a European Union delegation. The meeting is part of ongoing efforts to restore and normalize ties between the two sides. The meeting is being described as frank and constructive. That's a run through your headlines. Now, on to trade matters. Let's start right here in Africa. With over 22 countries having formally ratified it, the African Continental Free Trade Area is now in force. Now, the deal has the potential to make Africa home to the largest free trade area in the world. South Africa is one of 52 AU member states that signed up. Among those that stayed out, however, are Nigeria, the continent's biggest single economy, Benin and Eritrea. CGTN's Sumitra Naidu has more.
The African Continental Free Trade Agreement, or ACFTA, will see the establishment of a single market of goods and services for more than 1 billion people across the continent, with an estimated GDP of $2 trillion.
Companies that are based within South Africa are actually urged now to expand their horizons and do business with other companies throughout the continent in other regions such as Western Africa and also Central Africa, as these regions historically were dearth in terms of trade agreements.
In 2014, continental trade among African countries stood at just over 16%. The UN Economic Commission for Africa predicts the trade agreement could raise that to 25% by 2040.
The benefits, of course, is that it's the start of the economic integration process for the African continent. So for African members, it means that there would be less barriers to trade among each other.
The agreement may be in place, but it will still be a while before goods and services cross borders free of tariffs. Negotiations over African import duties are still underway.
What makes the ACFTA a little bit different to other regional economic community trade agreements is that they have a dispute settlement mechanism and a dispute settlement body. So there used to be one in SADC, the SADC tribunal, but this was dissolved a couple of years ago. So hopefully the strong institutions would mean that there is better state-to-state dispute resolutions.
There will be some challenges during implementation, but it's still a historic moment for Africa as countries commit to wider economic integration. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Still on the trade front, but not in Africa, the US Vice President Mike Pence says that trade talks between the United States and Mexico will continue. He's reiterating comments made by the US President Donald Trump that Mexico needs to do more in order to curb immigration across the common border. Talks are set to resume for a second day today, as officials hope to broker an agreement that aims at stopping the imposition of tariffs on goods from Mexico that should start on Monday. And these tariffs are no joke. They could rise as high as 25% by October. In Mexico, armed officials have also been blocking passage for migrants at its southern border with Guatemala.
Our message to the Mexican government: the time has come for Mexico to act decisively, to work with the United States of America, to assist us in enforcing our laws by enforcing their laws, by securing their border. And we made clear to them that President Trump is going to continue to stand firm until we bring this crisis of illegal immigration at our southern border to an end. Discussions will continue today at the State Department. The Secretary of State's team, as well as White House officials, will be meeting with the Mexican delegation. But again, I say, the meeting yesterday was positive. We welcome the efforts of Mexican officials to offer solutions to the crisis at our southern border. But we need Mexico to do more.
Now, we'll get back to the tariff business in just a moment from a different perspective. But first, oil. The CEO of the Russian oil giant Rosneft, Igor Sechin, has accused the United States of using energy as a political weapon. He says that the United States' golden age, if you will, of oil output has become what he's describing as an era of energy colonialism for other producers. He made the comments at an economic forum that's taking place in St. Petersburg.
The US are aspiring not only to speed up their own economic development, but to stop the growth of their main competitors, which leads to US losing the moral leadership further, as historically this country was one of those behind the idea of open market and competitiveness.
China's Ministry of Industry and Information Technology has approved commercial 5G licenses for 4 Chinese telecommunications firms. Now, once the networks are up and running, they're expected to greatly enhance speed, coverage and responsiveness of data services, not just for you and I as consumers, but also for internet-connected machines. Here's CGTN's Liu Yang with more.
The 5G era is officially upon China. On Thursday, China Telecom Group, China Mobile Communications Group, China United Network Communications Group, and the China Broadcasting and Television Network were all granted 5G licenses. The Ministry of Industry and Information Technology approved 4 to operate the 5th-generation digital cellular mobile communication business.
With integrated innovations such as 5G, manufacturing, energy and electronic transportation, this technology will greatly enhance integrated innovation and give new space to internet network power and strong support for the development of manufacturing.
Experts stress that after the issuance of 5G licenses, China will always welcome foreign enterprises to actively participate in China's 5G market, make common plans for China's 5G development, and share the achievements of China's 5G development.
Within this year, 5G will be commercialized in 40 cities in China. Let me give you an example. A high-quality video takes only 1 second to download with 5G. 5G has a lower latency, such as in car networking. By using 5G, the braking reaction distance is reduced to 3 cm from the previous 1.4 meters, enhancing the safety factor.
The ministry emphasized that China should actively promote integrated application and innovative development of 5G, focus on the industrial internet, the Internet of Things, and promote the digitalization and networking intelligent development of all industries. Experts say issuing commercial licenses for 5G operators will trigger the expansion of a global network and speed up 5G network construction. It will also give Chinese enterprises an advantageous position in the world, but 5G network deployment is a gradual process. It's unlikely we will see a boom of 5G users this year. Liu Yang, CGTN, Beijing.
Sort out your trash or face a fine. Effective 1st July, one of China's largest cities will start enforcing new rules that apply to all individuals and businesses. As part of World Environment Day observed on Wednesday, CGTN's Xu Mingqi takes a look at how Shanghai is hoping to clean up its act.
If you ever wondered what a megacity dump is like, you're looking right into the cold face of one now. This is Laogang, a massive waste processing complex that takes in more than 10,000 tons, or about 70% of the general waste that Shanghai produces every day. But for a metropolis with 24 million people, this is still not enough.
Phase 4 of the Laogang landfill was scheduled to last till 2024, but without expansion, we would have exhausted the original storage capacity this year.
As part of a solution to the problem, the city government has been encouraging its residents to sort their garbage, so what can be reused and recycled doesn't turn up at Laogang. So how does it work in practice?
Traditionally, in Shanghai's neighborhoods, each residential building or even each floor has waste bins like these, and you can dispose of your garbage anytime you want. But now the ubiquitous bins are to be retracted, and residents have to bring their trash to a certain drop-off point at specific hours of the day.
Getting people on board can be difficult. But in this downtown neighborhood, the local resident committee managed to pull things off.
We visited each of the households to hand out a notice and tell them about the reward scheme. The preparation alone took more than 2 months.
Still, that didn't prevent some from discarding their waste in the same old places. But with nothing in the box to link the owner to the waste, the community wardens have nowhere to go. Shanghai's battle against domestic waste, however, isn't only being fought on front doorsteps. The different types of recyclable waste entail the establishment of brand new processes and logistics chains.
I think that what the government is doing here is very ambitious. It requires a lot of investment, a lot of thinking, a lot of planning. You need the residents to buy into it, to separate their goods, to make it clean, so the government can effectively and efficiently move those materials back into the economy.
Whether Shanghai achieves its goal through its garbage sorting initiative, only time will tell. But the real war on waste may only begin here when people start to change the way they think about trash. Xu Mingqi, CGTN, Shanghai.
All right, then a quick run through commodity prices before the break here for you. Our focus tonight is going to be on crude oil. There we go. Brent crude at about $60 a barrel. Now, Russia, remember, is pretty much okay with oil prices at this level. Their allies are in OPEC, particularly Saudi Arabia, not so much. And that's the divergence we're now seeing between what you'd call OPEC plus. OPEC and other big producers like Russia, which I believe is the second largest producer at this point in time. They're not quite clear on what sort of price target they're looking at. In fact, the next meeting between OPEC and OPEC plus members, that's not clear just yet. But even at these levels, oil is about 12% higher so far in the year. That's effectively half of the year-to-date gains we saw earlier in the first quarter of 2019. Here's what's coming up next. We'll go to a centre in Burkina Faso that's equipping women to work in male-dominated sectors.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. Across Africa, cities are expected to be home to an extra 187 million people by 2025. That's not far off. Now, that surge in urban migration does require significant investment in supporting infrastructure from energy, housing, transportation, sanitation, water, you name it. Some countries, like Rwanda, are experimenting with a range of potential future solutions. The project you're about to see is in Kigali, and it aims to provide affordable housing in the land of 1,000 hills.
The four-phase project includes commercial centers. Broad International aims to provide government-subsidized housing units, affordable housing, and mid to high-end villas with a package solution.
Our preferable housing products have brought a revolution to the entire building industry, from standards to construction in Kigali.
Currently, the company's Rwanda plant has started the preparatory work. Its annual production capacity is expected to reach 200,000 square meters after it launches its operations.
It is expected that in August this year, we will start the plant construction for this project. The entire construction period is about 3 years.
Broad International has also built a technical college to train construction workers. It plans to cooperate with African countries to enhance the living standards of African people. Brian Toussaint, CGTN.
The Women's Deliver Conference is taking place in Canada, and it comes to close today. Kenya's President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta was in attendance, and he's pledged to make gender equality a reality in Kenya by 2030. Even though it's enshrined in the Constitution, the country's supreme law, gender equality is still a dream for many Kenyan women. As CGTN's Robert Nagila now reports, women are often disadvantaged even when it comes to getting access to finance.
Mercy Murundi has been selling second-hand clothes at her stall in Nairobi's Woodley area for the last 6 years. With little hope of qualifying for a bank loan, she depends on digital credit when she needs to restock.
I go for M-Shwari or KCB M-Pesa.
Why those particular ones?
Because they are easy to access.
Digital loans are easy to obtain, short-term but carry a high interest rate. All one needs is a smartphone, download the app, and you're in business.
They give you a duration of a month. Failure to pay, you are being charged 10 bob each day as an interest.
For Mercy and thousands of other female-owned small-scale businesses, digital loans are the only option available to them. Majority have no security to offer banks for a loan. A law passed in 2013, the Matrimonial Property Act, gives women the same rights as men to land ownership and inheritance. In theory at least, but a different matter in practice when traditional customs are involved. A few stalls away, Mercy Muthoni says mobile credit lenders have provided much-needed access to funds for businesswomen.
If they could reduce the interest rates, it would help us small businesses.
But Kenya's central bank is urging caution. More than 6 million Kenyans are digital borrowers. A study conducted in 2016 found more than 400,000 people blacklisted by credit reference bureaus for defaulting on loans as low as $20.
These online lenders, we have not licensed them. So there's a bit of caveat emptor, right? Which is really dangerous. We need to deal with them because in effect they are Shylocks.
Kenya's president has pledged to make gender equality a reality in the sub-Saharan nation. Only then can women effectively compete with their male peers. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
And finally, to Burkina Faso, where a women's centre for initiation and apprenticeship has been set up in Ouagadougou, the country's capital. But this one focuses on trades traditionally that were reserved for men. Its goal is to reduce gender-related work inequality in the West African economy. Here's CGTN's Alexandria Majala with the details on Grassroots tonight.
Senegal's Women's Centre for Initiation and Apprenticeship in Trades, or CFIAM, offers theoretical and practical training courses in electronics, automotive electricity, automotive bodywork, and sewing. Most learners come from disadvantaged backgrounds, but their passion and motivation show how determined they are to support their empowerment.
I loved painting, but when I got here and discovered sheet metal, I got into it and told myself, why not? I am curious, and here, discovering it, I fell in love with it, and frankly, I am doing well and I love the job I do.
This morning, we are working on the steering system. We have put down all the parts that are part of the direction, and we will check them, grease them, and then reassemble them. I chose this program because I like it, and as we say, there are no more jobs reserved for men.
Training at the CFIAM lasts 3 years for all the programs on offer. The total fees stand between $34 and $111 depending on the course you pick. With a regular employment rate of around 78%, the school has set up a credit fund for female learners looking to go into self-employment.
I started at CFIAM with two-wheel mechanics because at the moment the school was not doing four-wheel mechanics. After the training, I worked and reinforced my knowledge in other garages for 15 years before receiving the CFIAM funding that allowed me to install my own garage in 2017. Today, I receive the encouragement of several people. For them, it is rare to find a woman in this business. I think that mentalities are starting to change.
But despite the success stories, challenges still remain.
The main challenges for the learners remain related to stereotypes that are associated with these trades. One of our main objectives here is to reduce the professional gap that exists between men and women in Burkina Faso, which means working to involve women in trade once reserved for men.
CFIAM was opened in 1997. 2 other centers of its kind were set up in Kodougou and Sabu. For the 2019 academic year, there are 186 apprentices enrolled in the center at Ouagadougou, 100 in Kodougou and 50 in Sabu. The 3 centers have trained more than 400 girls in male-dominated fields since their creation. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
Let's cross over to Senegal, where an ICT company known as Jigen Tech is trying to fill in the enormous gap between women and men in the tech field by conducting boot camps and seminars, particularly focusing on training women and young girls. Here's CGTN's Astatal with the details.
Tech is a growing sector in Senegal. Jigen Tech looks to push for more women and girls to be engaged in the field. Founded in 2002, it also looked to create a network of women in the tech field.
In the ICT, there are a lot of women who are interested, but they're not enough. There is an enormous gap between men and women. It is a promoted field, making it a good investment for each country.
Through seminars and programs such as a coding boot camp, they look to also build capacity.
For young girls, we focus more on teaching them coding and leadership so that they can speak up and not be afraid to go for what they want. For women, we focus more on entrepreneurship and using ICT skills not only for entrepreneurship, but also for the everyday use.
For beneficiaries and volunteers, this can give them confidence as well as necessary skill sets.
I received mentorship on how to develop a business plan, how to improve a business, and it was something I really enjoyed and asked to keep in touch with them.
I was very shy. I was saying like, no, I can't do this. I can't, I'm too young. I'm a girl, I can't do this. But with practice, talking with them, seeing how they are, handling stuff, I say, man, I have to do this. And then from then, I get more confidence in myself.
Beyond encouraging women to join the ITC field, one of the co-founders, Awa Kaba, created an online e-commerce platform to empower rural women. Suretul is a Wolof word, which means not so far. On the platform, consumers can buy processed goods from rural women based around the country. Launched in 2014, Suretul has helped over 2,800 rural women brand and market their products.
So Suretul is basically an e-commerce platform that really helps women who work in the agricultural process side, who do not really have access to the market, and who was supported by international organizations to create the units of process, but do not really know how they can go beyond the processing side, how they can really have access to the market, how can they market the product and brand their product.
From mentoring to supporting Senegal's agricultural field, women in tech are shaking things up. Asatal, CGTN, Dakar, Senegal.
All right, then I'll run through the currencies here for you. So PMI data came out for the month of May. For Kenya. Some interesting revelations coming out over there. You'll recall the previous set indicated that we'd fallen into contraction territory. 49.3 is the previous reading. Now we're back above 51, which essentially suggests there's a bit of expansion that we're seeing, and it's at the fastest rate we've seen since January this year. Whether or not that trend continues, of course, is an entirely different matter. As far as the debt auction is concerned in Kenya, the usual herding effect firmly in play. All of the bids, a bulk of them really, went onto the longer dated short-term notes, about 364-day T-bills, about 24 or so billion shillings of bids going into that direction. The remaining notes, 91-day, 182-day, barely getting any action whatsoever. That's it for tonight's edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content you've seen here in the last hour. There's several ways of getting your thoughts back to us, all of them on your screens right now. I'm Ramanyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your company in the last hour. The World Today is up next from Washington, D.C.